when I got the note on this, I said, hey, this is something. I want to find out what's going on. This is a situation in Texas. The organization is the Pacific Legal Foundation, defending liberty and justice for all. We've had folks from the Pacific Legal on in the past, and tonight we have joining us Wen Fa. He's an attorney, and he's working on a Texas T-shirt case. And I'm looking at this and going, what? What are we talking about? And it apparently has to do with the attire that you wear when you're voting. And so with that, it's a pleasure to welcome Wen Fa to the program. Mr. Fa, good evening. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. All right, let's talk about the background on this Texas T-shirt. Is it a Texas-sized T-shirt? What exactly is the issue here?
Right. So the issue is whether a voter gives up her First Amendment rights at the polling place. Just last year, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down a decision that struck down a Minnesota law that banned voters from wearing political T-shirts when they go to vote. Texas, PLF represented the Minnesota voters in that case, and now PLF is representing Texas voters in a similar challenge, First Amendment free speech challenge to a Texas law that bans voters from T-shirts like the T-shirt our client wore to the polling place.
And what was that T-shirt? What was on the T-shirt?
So our client, Jillian Oshowitz, she's married to a firefighter, and she wore a T-shirt that said Houston Firefighters on the front with a small logo of the AFL-CIO. And what the election judge, what the poll worker that at the polling place told her was that she couldn't vote in that because there happened to be a ballot initiative on the ballot that day about firefighter pay. So the poll worker actually made her go to the restroom and turn her shirt inside out before she was allowed to cast her vote. And that's just un-American. You shouldn't have to choose between your vote or your First Amendment rights in this country, but that's exactly what the poll worker made Jillian do.
You know, one would argue that any message on a shirt or on a hat could be construed as having a political message or motivation. I wear a sweatshirt from time to time that represents an organization that I'm a part of, the National Newspaper Association, and I can imagine that might make some folks uncomfortable. They don't like newspapers, whatever. But I'm sitting here wondering, where do we draw the line on this? That's just because there was, for all intents and purposes, well, what if she were coming from work and the shirt that she's wearing, this is a lady, but was her work shirt representing the organization? She might have been a firefighter. What is she supposed to do? Change her clothes before she votes?
That's right. Voters are put in this uncomfortable position where they're going to the polling place and they don't even know if they're going to be charged with a criminal penalty because it is a criminal offense in Texas to wear one of these shirts to the polling place, believe it or not.
Really?
And, and like you said, there are a lot of line drawing problems. The government just gives poll workers in each polling station arbitrary discretion to enforce the law. They might be enforced differently from one polling station to the next. And, there was a famous incident in the Supreme Court oral argument when the government's attorney in that case was asked, what about a T-shirt with the text of the Second Amendment? Would that be banned at the polling place? And
Absolutely.
The attorney said, yes, that would be banned. What about a T-shirt with the text of the First Amendment? And the attorney said, no, that wouldn't be banned. So I think it just highlights the arbitrariness of laws like this in giving election officials basically unfettered discretion to do whatever they want.
What is absolutely fascinating about this is all the complaints associated with trying to create all sorts of barriers to electioneering, to voting. We had the Help America Voting Act, HAVA, which was all designed to make voting easier. And yet we have now a situation which basically is going through the court system that represents a barrier. We've had all sorts of accusations in other states about how there was some sort of use of case in point, voter ID. That is being challenged on the grounds that it makes it difficult for folks who may not have an ID. Yet now they have to worry about the clothing they wear. There's a significant paradox here in this argument, and I'm surprised that it's even seeing the light of day.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of surprising information about the way that Texas has enforced this law. So I was saying earlier, there happened to be a ballot initiative about firefighter pay. So not only did the election officials in Texas, in Houston particularly, stop our client Jillian from voting in her Houston Firefighters T-shirt, they actually, going off of what you said earlier about people getting off work for the day, there were firefighters who got off their shift, 24-hour shift that day, and went to the polling place to cast their vote, and the election officials at those polling stations wouldn't even let some of the firefighters cast their vote because, there was a firefighter initiative, so how can you cast your vote in a firefighter uniform? I mean, it's just...
That just defies common sense.
Exactly, absolutely right, and that's why Pacific Legal Foundation was interested in this case, and that's why we took this case, and we're representing our clients free of charge, not just to vindicate their First Amendment free speech rights, but also the free speech rights of all Americans.
Where is this in the process? Again, and by the way, just before I give him the opportunity to respond, our guest this afternoon, Wen Fa, that's F-A, by the way. He's an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Where is this in the court system at this point?
Well, we just filed our complaint on Thursday, so it's still relatively early on. The government officials, Texas officials, have about two to 3 weeks to respond to that, and then we will likely engage in a process of fact-gathering that lawyers call discovery, and hope for a positive ruling before November, because that's when the next elections happen in some parts of Texas.
Our conversation is opening the doors for people who are listening going, okay, I'm going to go into the poll with the Second Amendment written on my T-shirt, see what happens. I'm a little discouraged by this, Mr. Fa, on the grounds that, one, it's commonsensical. Two, it breaks every rule that has been instituted to make voting easier, to simplify the voting process. I can't believe that this has to go to the Supreme Court. That is what's really disturbing me. It makes no sense.
Well, we're certainly willing to fight this all the way up to the Supreme Court if we have to. But this case is still in district court, and we hope that a district court judge, with last year's Supreme Court decision in the Minnesota case as guidance, will strike down the Texas law and let voters exercise their First Amendment rights in the polling place, as they do elsewhere.
I can't believe that this is an issue in Texas. I never would have imagined this. Wen Fa with us this afternoon with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Let's talk about other items associated with discrimination here, by the way, and that is a form of discrimination. And this is something else that you and your organization are dealing with as well. It has to do with New York City, a discrimination case. And I gather it involves Mayor de Blasio as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mayor de Blasio has long stated that so basically New York has some of the best high schools, specialized high schools in the country, schools like Stuyvesant and Bronx Science that have produced Nobel Prize winners. And de Blasio, admissions to those schools have been long governed by an objective test. But the mayor has said that it was a disgrace that these schools don't look like the rest of the city, and has implied that there were too many Asians at these schools. So he made a bunch of changes to the admissions policy to keep Asians out of those schools.
So it has nothing to do with qualification and abilities. It all has to do with optics. It doesn't look like the rest of the city or something of that nature. We don't care if the rest of the city isn't able to do the job. It just doesn't look like them. Is that what I'm supposed to conclude from this?
Well, that's what Mayor de Blasio has concluded. But as I was speaking to a bunch of parents last December when we launched the case, that's the great thing about America, is that there could be someone who looks exactly like me, but has completely different interests, has completely different hobbies, completely different background, socioeconomic and other experiences. So we really can't judge people by how they look. We can't judge people by the color of their skin. And that's why our clients, parents and organizations in New York, are standing up against discrimination and standing up for the equal rights of all Americans.
I, in both of these cases, Mr. Fa, it's a shame that you're spending your time arguing this. It strikes me that none of this comes under the category of commonsensical or intelligent conclusions. I can't imagine that we in this particular case in New York City, the mayor looks at the student population based on merit, by the way, and abilities, and says, oh, it doesn't look like the rest of the city, so we've got to make it look like the rest of the city, ignoring the fact that entry into these schools is based on ability and merit. At times, when you sit down to do these court cases and argue them, do you have to keep yourself from breaking out laughing?
Well, I think I get the fact that these are ridiculous laws and laws that are unconstitutional. But we work very hard for our clients because there are
I understand. But I'm just looking at this. Now I have to worry about whether my shirt has a subtle message on it. If I've got this is much. Some of our audience will remember if it has a Lacoste emblem on it. Maybe that will upset one or two of the judges, and they'll say, "Oh no, you can't vote as long as your shirt has that alligator on it." I don't. This is, and then in the case of New York City, you don't look like the rest of the city, so therefore you can't attend the school, even though you qualify and you meet the criteria. And none of this makes sense.
Well, you'd be surprised at how uncommon common sense can be sometimes. But luckily for us, there's a Constitution, there's a First Amendment right to free speech, there's a 14th Amendment right to equal protection, and we're willing to litigate in courts in Texas and New York and all over the country to vindicate those rights.
All right, this is very important for those who are listening to the program, because here's an organization that will provide the assistance, again, justifiably, and we have to say that, and you have to meet certain criteria. The Pacific Legal Foundation. We chatted with you in the past, not you particularly, Mr. Fa, but others from your organization on issues in North Carolina for private property rights and things of this nature. So I do appreciate your time this evening. I look forward to further conversations. When I read this story, and I'm thinking to myself, there are folks, particularly in this issue in Texas, where I guess just before I go to the break, was it because it identified firefighters, or did it because it had the AFL-CIO emblem on it?
It's hard to say what was going through that election judge's head that day. The poll worker had a lot of power and used the power to stop our client from exercising her First Amendment rights, and that's why we're fighting back in court.
Wow. Do appreciate your time and also commend you on your work. Wen Fa, our guest this afternoon, and thank him for being with us. The organization Pacific Legal Foundation, by the way, pacificlegal.org is the website. Pacific, as in the ocean, pacificlegal.org. Mr. Foss, thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240.